Mm,
I don't know that she's in because
yeah, she's not here yet, Victor.
we're, yeah,
Do you want to do
we're
it?
chatting.
Sorry.
Okay, happy
You're
to
so
step
great
in,
at it. Thank you.
please. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to say that with everybody here from the state of Washington checking in, except for, certain special guests that are attending. But we have a very special guest today and a great topic. So we're glad to have his time available for us. We have a few preliminary things that we need to go over first before we turn it over to Danny. Just to let you know, there's some upcoming events. Always go to the Washington NIGP chapter website. Click on the calendar, upcoming events for some local and nationwide events. And if you haven't signed up for VCon, please do that. And then also for Forum coming up in Denver this time in July, which will be very exciting. And always excited to see the Washington chapter represented very well. And oh, I don't want to say next slide. I'm going to touch my nose when it's time for next slide. We always like you to encourage dialogue and engagement during these, but please keep it to the chat. Mute your phone, especially if you're eating lunch. Jenny is muted because she's enjoying lovely salmon for lunch today, and we thank her for muting. Also, if you're going to be posting in the chat, make sure your name is your name, because sometimes when you register, it might not be your name, it might be a phone number, but double check that too. And as we go through, Danny, I didn't check it with you. Did you want questions as they come up, or do you want them held till the end?
Yes, please. I did post in the chat. This is a very interactive session, so please, questions, comments as we go. We'll try to leave a little bit of room at the end, but with only being an hour, it'd be good to just do them as we go.
So feel free to raise your hand if you have a question, or just put it in the chat and we'll direct Danny's attention to that as we go along. And with that, Danny, I don't have your intro, so I am simply going to give the title and turn it over to you, because we know as seasoned NIGP instructors, we always love it when we're introduced with our full page biography read
Please,
in
no.
advance. And then there's no time left for the presentation. So with today's Lunch and Learn topic, procurement, it's not just purchasing, unlock the strategic advantage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the amazing Danny Mays.
I'll imagine there was just thunderous applause.
Well, golf clap. There was
everybody was just on mute, so you couldn't hear it. But I imagine that it was roarous, like the crowd at Oriole Park at Camden Yards when the Orioles won opening day the other day. Thank you very much, Victor, Kara, and everybody. Jenny, thanks for having me. Really want to, just before we dive in, just give another plug for VCon. I got a chance to take a look at some of the content that they are building fresh. It is fresh IT content. It is very, very useful. It is very topical. It's very current. And the value of VCon is just unbelievable. It's such a great value for what you get. I am not being compensated to say that. So if you have not registered for VCon and your budgets will allow, please consider registering for that. It is really such a great event. And Victor put the link in the chat. As Victor mentioned, coming off of Procurement Month, I think this is a great topic. This was born by my gears getting grinded a few too many times with people conflating the purchasing function with the procurement function. So this is partially an educational session, partially a therapy session, perhaps for some of us. So again, please, let's make this as interactive as we can. Kara and I are fueled up with some Red Bull. So we have the wings already. So please get on our level and let's have a conversation rather than just me giving you a soliloquy for an hour, which is about as exciting as it sounds. So why are you here? Perhaps you're here for a contact hour, and that's lovely. Really happy for that. But as far as this session, what we're hoping to do is we're going to acknowledge what people think of us. And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it might be outdated, incomplete, incorrect, some beautiful mixture of all three of those. But we're going to acknowledge those external perceptions of public procurement and how we can shift them. Until we acknowledge the issue, there's no way we can take it forward. So it's almost like we're sitting down at an AA meeting, introducing ourselves and saying what we know to be true about external perceptions of public procurement. We're going to look at different functions and competencies. When we're looking to build a team in our procurement office, what are we looking for? What aptitudes and attitudes are we looking for in those team members as we build the perfect team? We're going to talk about how we can get involved earlier in the process and look for early warning indicators that can make or break our procurements from the very beginning. How can we shift procurement forward more into that strategic role that we really need to be in order to function optimally? And then hopefully you'll leave at least with 3 new ideas. No refunds, it was free, so I'm confident you'll get your money's worth out of it. So what does procurement do? If I was on the streets of Washington and I asked your end users what procurement does, what would they say? You can put it into the chat, shout it out. It can be chaos, that's cool. Silence is the only thing that's not cool. So just however you choose to express yourself is good with me.
What would we hope they say, or what do they?
No, what would they say? Different question than what would they say we do?
We are known as the No Department, NO.
The No Department, we buy stuff. What is procurement? A roadblock, gets us stuff, buy stuff. Linda said they probably have no clue, which is true. We'll talk a little bit about that. Get stuff done, hopefully. A helpful partner. I would love if that's what our end users think of our department, because that's what we are. We're all driving to the same mission, or we should be. So we definitely want to be looked at as a helpful partner. Make sure we follow the rules. Compliance, too many rules, trainer. What would your suppliers say? How does it change if we ask your suppliers?
Hoops to jump through, definitely roadblocks, problem.
Give us a contract. Too many words, too difficult to do business. Yes, yes, yes. Big problem here in Maryland. They apparently don't like RFP documents that are the size of the New Testament. Yep, they don't love it. Very responsive. Hopefully, we need our supplier community. PO numbers, wish they got paid faster. We'll just get this out of the way now. Procurement being under finance or involved with finance is why that problem has happened. We're 2 different functions that have been pushed together, and we get calls about, why haven't you paid my invoice? Well, it's because we don't do that here in procurement. E-supplier portal is very cumbersome. Ooh. Everything takes forever. Okay. How about your elected officials? Why won't you take fax bids anymore? I haven't heard that one in a while. What do your elected officials think you do in procurement?
Confusing stuff.
Help us follow the rules, hopefully. To the extent that our elected officials like to follow the rules.
Why didn't you choose the vendor we like?
Why didn't you choose that vendor from my district that's now calling me complaining they didn't get a contract? Gatekeepers. Yep. Overall, pretend that the budgets have gone way down, which they're about to, and you can't afford Steve Harvey anymore. And so you've got me, and we're on Family Feud. What is the overall #1 answer for what procurement does? We buy stuff. We buy stuff.
No.
How does that make you feel when you see that? I will tell you objectively, this is true. How does it make you feel? Misunderstood, overly simplified. Yes, yes, yes. I have a little eye roll. Look at this production value. Ready? Bam, he's rolling his eyes. They don't understand. Yes, Linda. They don't understand that there's so much more. This is a gross oversimplification of what we do. And it's our fault. It's our fault. We did it to ourselves because we are afraid to promote the value of what we do, because we have been trained, perhaps beaten into submission, that we are behind the scenes, not to take credit, just there to take blame. We need to not be afraid to shout from the rooftops the value of procurement and that it's not purchasing. So, oh, you don't know what IT does. You would know if they weren't doing it. Kimberly, I guarantee. Procurement and purchasing are different. Do we need to purchase things? Absolutely. If we don't end up with the product or service that our organization needs, we haven't met the mission. But simply saying all we do is put a blindfold on, reach around and point, and whatever we point at is what we buy, that's purchasing. Purchasing is that momentary transactional process of actually executing a buy. But before all of that, there's a strategic, comprehensive framework that we go through to make sure that when we make the purchase, it's the best value for our organization. Think about your personal life. When you went and bought your last house, did you just drive down the street and look for the first for sale sign and go, that's the one right there? That's purchasing without procurement in front of it. No, there was market research. You thought about areas, you thought about schools, you thought about all kinds of things. Maybe that's too complicated. And this is a lunch and learn. So I thought pizza, right? Pizza, lunch. Procurement is the entire pizza. And what we've allowed folks to do is distill us down into a single slice. Purchasing is a single slice of the procurement process. And I want us to think about that the next time someone says purchasing. No, we're procurement. Correct them. We have a marketing problem and we need to solve it. We need to be marketers, both to all of those stakeholder groups we talked about, to our internal, to our supplier community, to our elected officials. We have to promote it because guess what? Nobody else is going to do it for us. So if you're going to sit back and wait for someone else to promote your worth, it's not going to happen. And Victor, I could not agree more. When a lot of our titles say buyer, or our offices are purchasing, or we're purchasing technicians, or we're under finance and we report to the finance director, all of that is belittling the procurement process and thwarting our ability to actually execute this. So what we need to do is find the people that have the ability to change this for us and make the case. But if we don't make the case and we are not bold and we don't step out there, Kimberly said she can't get any support. That's the thing. We have to keep making this case. If we don't make enough noise, no one is really caring about changing the status quo any more than us. It's really only impacting us at the moment, but I'm going to show you how it actually impacts your entire entity. So we're not doing this from an egocentric standpoint. We're doing this because the procurement function needs to function optimally in order to benefit the entire organization and help the entire organization meet its mission. Look at these hats, beautiful hats. In any given day, how many of these hats go on your head?
Several hats, for sure.
Lots of hats. How's the salmon, Jenny? Good?
Yep. Say all of it except for maybe chief negotiator at this point.
Okay. But certainly someone in the procurement office is functioning as a chief negotiator.
Yep. Good, bad,
Good
cop,
cop.
bad. Yes, good
Go
cop,
ahead.
bad cop. That's a popular one.
Yep. We have to play that role a lot. Let me ask you this. How many of those hats have anything to do with purchasing anything? Do any of them go to directly purchasing anything? The sourcing, arguably, there's a part of the sourcing process that goes to purchasing, but there's a lot more that goes into it. Look at all of these things. Oh, and Samantha, Office of One. I spent 3.5 years as an Office of One, and it was both the most rewarding and frustrating experience of my life. But everybody should be an Office of One at some point. It's an interesting experience. It's fun and challenging, exactly. Here's the point. And maybe if you can't get support, a lot of times executives have that like, oh, squirrel, oh, a noise over here. So they're not going to look at a whole slide deck, right? This is a really good slide to show them because our roles transcend the transactional. We're wearing multiple of these hats every day. I love this quote. We know more than people think, and we put out more fires than people realize. On top of this whole stack of hats, there should be a firefighter helmet, should there not? Anybody else ever feel like you have a day planned and you come into the office and you're doing nothing but fighting those fires, wrangling those cats? That is so much more than purchasing. We are well beyond what people are giving us credit for. Let's dive into some of the items that we have to worry about and lead in procurement. The life cycle. So looking at asset management life cycle and these 4 stages, we are managing this process. The problem is, well, there's multiples, but in this particular instance, the problem is, does the planning process happen without us sometimes? Do you feel like the first time you find out about a transaction is often when the requisition hits your desk? We have completely lost our ability to be strategic. Procurement isn't just what we do, it's when we get the chance to do it. And if we're not positioned to do it at the right time, that's when we get that red tape. You're in the way. I already know what I want. You know what? I already picked the vendor for you. I don't even know why you have to do a procurement process. I'm making your life easy. Just give me a PO. We need to demonstrate that when we're included earlier, there's benefit to it. So we need to be involved in all 4 of these stages in order for it to be optimal. And we're not focusing on just the process. This process goes round and round, but the assets that the organization acquires go round and round this life cycle as well. We're the underdog. We talked about let's acknowledge it. So let's acknowledge it. We're the underdog. How do we shed this old school mentality? What procurement means to an organization now is drastically different than what it meant even 5 years ago. Does anyone disagree with that? What we're being counted upon to do here in 2025. If you go back to January of 2020, how different is it now what we're counted upon to do? How different is the technology? All of the resources that we have to cultivate for our organizations. But meanwhile, yeah, it feels faster. Absolutely. I've been at this for about 18 years, and the pace of procurement now is so much faster than it was before because of the streamlining. We're not doing POs on 3-part carbon anymore. There's a lot of efficiencies we're able to gain through e-procurement, through ERP systems. But the story remains the same because we're doing a poor job of marketing. So we still have that gatekeeper, the clerical, the paper pusher, the red tape. Victor said the office of no. How do we get out of this? What have you done in your own agencies to try to shed this? What kind of ideas do you have about how we can do this? Because if I had all the answers, I would be able to write a book and make a whole lot of money. What can we do? What have you done? Yes, participate in strategy meetings. Love it. Better customer relations. When I got to the judiciary at the end of 2020, our procurement office was not where it needed to be, both from an aptitude, attitude, position within the organization, audit findings, and pretty much anything you can dream of that you wouldn't want to deal with, we were dealing with. And one of the first things I did, to Jason's point, is, and actually to both of Jason's points, including his most recent one, I set up meetings with all of our super users. I looked at who our main customers were within the organization, and I just started setting up meetings where I let them yell at me. I let them yell about how terrible everything was. And because meanwhile, if I cut through all of the yelling and screaming and posturing, I was getting the recipe on how to fix it all. And so what I started doing over time, Jenny talks about relationship building. That's what I was doing. And so I set up proactive bi-weekly meetings where we would talk about, what do you have going on? What can we help you with? This second bullet, we really don't win. And not only in procurement, we don't win as an organization unless our customers, internal and external, are coming to us because they want to. They want to come. When I go to Kara, she knows her stuff. She's adding value, not, oh, crap. The policy says now I got to go to Kara. Dang it. We don't win until we position ourselves as subject matter experts, as someone who actually can cut through and make their jobs easier and make the outcomes better. And so that was a big way that I did it, humanizing that function, putting faces to names. And listen, over time, those yelling meetings became a lot calmer, and they became what Jason suggested, which were strategy meetings. Did somebody have something? I thought somebody was unmuted. I don't want to.
I think
I
someone
just
just
don't want to.
their throat.
Okay, I just didn't want to cut off any ideas. And Jenny busting into her mango for dessert. That's a great meal you got today. So when we humanize that function, those meetings turned into really helpful back and forths. And sometimes, listen, they were 2 minutes long. We don't really have any updates since last week. Here's a picture of my dog, though. Oh, cool, cute. And then it became, now we're colleagues. Now we're all driving in the same direction. One of the first things I did when I got in is we didn't have a mission statement in procurement. We didn't have a vision statement. So I aligned a mission and vision statement in procurement to the overall mission and vision of the Maryland Judiciary. And so I can show, somebody said, explain the why. I think that might have been Jason too. I'm able to explain the why in terms of how it helps us reach our mission as an organization. And we should all be aligned with that. So certainly there are other ideas. And yeah, Victor, I never knew you all did that. When we have these meetings and show what we can do, when we're allowed to do it at the right time, it actually speeds up the process, not slow it down. The slowdown, the perceived slowdown, is when we don't find out about a transaction until the requisition hits our desk, and our end users, bless their hearts, I know that's more of a Southern thing, have come up with all these ideas that are either illegal, immoral, unethical, or some beautiful combination of all of those. And now we have to walk the transaction back to where we should have been in the first place. So if we can just get ourselves where we should be, that's when we can prove our value. And that's why I say it's not just what we do, it's when we do it. And Jenny, I love that. A lot of losses within our family, taking a moment to recognize that before business. I run a people first shop here at the Judiciary. People first, we got to drive to the mission, but if we don't have people that are happy, they're not going to provide good service to our customers. It's really just the Chick-fil-A, Nordstrom philosophy, right? Happy employees, happy customers. So if we're not cultivating that environment, we're not honoring people as individuals, recognizing that they have things going on in their personal lives, then we're just transactional at that point. So I love that, Jenny. Collaboration. Everything we do requires collaboration. We talked about that already a little bit. We have to manage those relationships. We're managing relationships with our end users, with our director level folks, with our supplier community. We have to develop these clear shared goals, even with our suppliers. We want our suppliers to win. We want win-win contracts with our suppliers. We want them to make money. So we need to work with all of our stakeholders to develop clear shared goals. How many people have made a mistake today? You can use your chat or your reacts or shout out and say you did it. We make mistakes. We make mistakes every day. I've made several mistakes. I'm 3 hours ahead of you guys, so I've had a little bit more time to screw stuff up. But I've made several mistakes today. And that's okay. What's not okay is for us to act like the cat in the litter box and try to cover up the mistake before someone finds it. There is a lot of humbleness and a lot of humanity in admitting that you make a mistake, in saying, we fell off on that deadline, we missed that email, here's how we're going to fix it. When you develop that ability Does anyone work in an organization where everybody feels like they just want to point the finger at someone else and just not take the blame for anything? Like, I'm not getting blamed for this. No, no, no. It was procurement. No, it was finance. It was IT. That doesn't, no one wins there. So I'm always happy. Yeah, Charles, it's rough. It's rough for everybody. And by the way, we're not driving it all to the mission. We're stalled. The engine's dead. So there is a lot of power in admitting that you made a mistake. I never will come down on a staff member that made an honest mistake. Now, if they make the same exact honest mistake 6 times, okay, then we've got a problem, right? But the human element of procurement, which by the way, will never be replaced with AI because procurement requires a human element and critical thinking. We're going to make mistakes. It's an imperfect world when we're dealing with human beings. But when we don't take ownership of our mistakes, that's when the collaboration falls apart. Compliance. So we're talking about all this rainbows and butterflies stuff. Yeah, Danny, this all sounds great, but we have to operate within the guardrails of government. And sometimes those guardrails can be in quite tight. Maryland, we are one of the most regulated states when it comes to procurement. So we don't really have a lot of space to artfully weave in between these guardrails of compliance. When we're putting contracts together, we have to make sure we're complying with all of the laws, the policies, the procedures. We have to monitor that on a continuous basis. Maybe we're getting federal money. Maybe it's an international transaction, and that's bringing even more into the process. So that's all things that we're thinking about as well. Supplier management. Does anyone still work with folks that have first of all, maybe Mr. Yuck is like an old, does Mr. Yuck land with this crowd, the old school poison guy? Okay. Because sometimes when I use Mr. Yuck, they go, who is that? And so it makes me feel very old. But does anyone work with anyone who has that mentality? I'm not talking to vendors. If they want to bid, they can just go on the bid board and find the bid and bid. They can just bid. It's not my job to talk to them and, guide them through the process. And then there's the opposite problem too, where we talk too much. But in a procurement shop, we need our suppliers. If we've seen anything over the last 5 years, suppliers have gone out of business. Suppliers have merged. Suppliers have been bought out. If we have a very small supplier base and the potential suppliers understand that, man, that organization just doesn't want new people coming into the fold, I'm not even wasting my time trying to transact with them. And then a couple of your suppliers go by the wayside, your organization's in trouble. You're not honoring the hallmark of public procurement, which is fair, open, transparent competition, because you've chased away all your potential suppliers. So not only can we talk to vendors, I don't like the V word, a vendor is someone you buy a hot dog from in Times Square, right? Suppliers are our partners. Victor, what do you want me to explain?
Oh, no, that was for Samantha explaining here. We have the opposite problem.
Oh yeah, Samantha, I'm guessing you have some loose-lipped like end users or project managers that like to have conversations with your suppliers. Lack of cone of silence. Yeah. So definitely there's a time and a place, right? I just had a situation today where a angry supplier during an open RFP that they've been eliminated from for not ascribing to something that was in the RFP 3 times as a requirement. 3 times it was in there. And they were eliminated, and we offered a conversation to discuss it. And instead of taking us up on that, they went right to the Chief Justice of our Supreme Court and started complaining, which completely runs afoul of keeping the, to his credit, he did not entertain the conversation. But yes, we have that problem where it gets outside of the cone of silence, gets outside of what we're allowed to talk about. So certainly there's a time and a place where our suppliers can't know certain information about an open procurement, an upcoming procurement, a procurement under evaluation. But generally speaking, we need our suppliers to understand the market, to understand what's going on. when we have a need, suppliers are more likely to gravitate toward organizations that look at them as partners rather than looking at them as just a vendor that can bid on whatever. Integrity. It kind of goes back a little bit to being willing to say you made a mistake. But when we lay out a project or lay out something we're going to do and we make a commitment, we honor the commitment. And if we can't honor the commitment, then we have to be honest about how it's going to shift. Does that mean we always give our end users what we want or what they want? God, no. If we gave the end users everything they wanted, we would all be in jail by the end of the week. So we have to understand their objectives and they have to trust us to get them there. In my office, and it was a really weird shift when we did it, I don't let the word no be a word we use. We never use the word no. Because what does the word no do to the person's, Jenny asked me a question, I'm like, no. Immediately, what does that do?
I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Shuts it down. You don't want to talk to me. Negative perception, stops communication, nothing good. So we have a series of very artful ways of explaining, I understand where we need to go. I understand the North Star, I understand the objective. However, we have to navigate it this way. So we're not saying no, it's I understand and here's how I can get you there. So we do not use that word. I don't have too many crazy rules, but that's one of them, because from a customer service standpoint, the word no, yes, garners that frustration. All of a sudden, people come to procurement ready to fight anyway, right? And so when the word no comes, they're like, damn it, I knew I should have been ready to fight. Here we go. Like, we don't want that to happen. So we want to explain the why. We want to understand where our end user wants to go. And what's the litmus test? Does anyone have an end user that will go, show me in the policy where it says I can't do it? Show me in law where it says I can't do it. Is it illegal? Because if it's not illegal, I'm going to do it. So show me where it says I can't do it. Anybody have any end users like that? Yeah. It's not about that. Certainly, if it's illegal or against policy, we aren't going to do it. I mean, that's obvious, but it goes beyond that. Just because it's legal doesn't make it ethical, because every situation has nuances that we need to evaluate in order to come to an ethical decision. So my basic test is, when I go home tonight and my head hits the pillow, do I feel good about myself when I make that decision? And the longer you're in the game, and folks that have been in the game longer hopefully can attest to this with me, you develop what I like to call a procurement officer's intuition about what's right and what's wrong. The bravery is to do what's right, even when it's not what's popular or what someone who's a couple levels above you on the old org chart wants you to do. And that is why when I'm talking to newer procurement folks, that's one of the cautions I give them. You're going to constantly be pulling in folks that are more important than you, above you on the org chart, have more power, have more title. But if you don't do that and you're not willing to do that, this is not the profession that you want to be in, because our job is to make sure that we're making ethical, fair decisions. I'm reading what Jason put in the chat. Yeah, and here's the thing about consequences, about ethical actions. I don't know if you guys know this, I'm being sarcastic. When a newspaper chooses to dive in on a procurement issue, they only need like this much of it to be true, right? In order to blow it up into something that's a really juicy, salacious headline. If we've seen, I'm not going to talk politics, but if we've seen anything in the divide in politics, it's, I can write a headline that'll make you feel any way I want you to feel, regardless of what the facts underneath are. So when we don't make ethical decisions and we even open a crack in the door where they can look through and see anything that might have the appearance of impropriety, that's where it breaks down. And so the consequences Yeah, civil penalties, jail, all those scary things, but we're here to protect the organization from undue criticism. And it takes an organization potentially years to recover from something like that, even if it turns out to not really be 100% true. So a caution that not only are the penalties and the potential issues to the individual, but to the organization as well. Here's the most surprising part of my entire presentation. The public sector is not great at innovation. I will pause for a second while everyone gasps, spits out their lunch at the surprise that the public sector is not great at innovation. That's more about why we need our suppliers. Because guess who's really great at innovation? The private sector, our suppliers who have stakeholders and people who stockholders that they have to answer to. They keep the lights on by being innovative. So if we don't have those relationships, we're stuck wondering why no one has a VCR to put our tape in anymore. We are stuck in the past. Yeah, it's the way we've always done it. That does not work anymore. Arguably, it never did. But in this day and age, if we're not moving with the times, man, we are really doing our organization a great disservice as a procurement team. We have to embrace it. We have to adapt. We have to respond quickly. Look at what a lot of us had to do during the pandemic. I never thought I would have to become a medical expert on what a viable ventilator would be. I mean, that's crazy. When I got into procurement, I wasn't like, one day I'm going to be a medical expert. But we have to embrace that innovation. We have to have those supplier partnerships so that we aren't making assumptions about things we don't know about. We can call upon the expertise of our supplier partners, and researching the market is critical to doing that. By the way, here we are 38 minutes into this, and we have not bought anything. We haven't bought anything. All this stuff we have to do is way, way before we actually buy anything. And so that's when I say it's our fault. Are we telling this story? Are we out there showing people our value, or are we just sitting back and allowing them to think what they think? Risk management. How many of you have dedicated risk managers in your organizations? And how many of you don't? When it's not vacant. Well, yeah, Samantha, my next question was going to be, so if you don't have a risk manager, who's everybody looking to look at risks? Us. And another thing, when I got into procurement, I'm not a risk manager. I didn't go to school for risk management. I don't have that innate ability, but it's something that we have to develop in procurement. Hopefully, with the help of some of our partners, either in legal, a risk management. But yeah, Linda, we have to assess that risk. And it's not just financial risk. We just talked about reputational risk a couple of slides ago. I can't call it. My daughter got mad at me when I was putting this together last night. I called it a PowerPoint, and she told me that you're not allowed to call them that anymore because that's what old people call them. So it's a deck. It's a slide deck. So that was a couple slides ago in the deck. So we aren't just talking about financial risk, reputational risk, environmental risk, social risk, risk to our supplier communities, risk to our departments within the yeah, I know. The PowerPoint thing, yeah, it got me. What did she say? She said that's so millennial cringe or something. It's like a whole different language now. Yeah. Yeah. I don't recommend teenagers, for those of you thinking about diving in. It's not I don't really recommend it. But it's critical for us to assess these risks to maintain the stability of our operation and the stability of our organization. Again, if all we're doing is purchasing, we are blind to this. We're making a purchase based on, oh, well, that's the cheapest one. Boom, let's go. We are blind to all of this, and this could be catastrophic. I've seen small transactions. Maybe somebody signed a contract they weren't supposed to sign out in not in procurement. Procurement never knew about it, but there was some crazy clause in that contract. It could have been for $500 that has cost the organization 6 figures in risk because of something that has happened. So it isn't just about money. It isn't just about the low bid or getting the lowest cost. There's so much more to risk than just, oh, well, is it going to bust the budget? Resiliency. This slide is only here because I wanted an excuse to put Tigger on a slide. Not really, but I do like the Tiggers on the slide. We have to be resilient in procurement. A lot of times we are pushing through things that we're not really sure about. What I've seen in some procurement officers, being timid is not really a great trait in a procurement officer. A lot of times we are pushing forward absent all the answers to the questions. What we need to know is the right questions to ask to move us forward, to drive that value, to maintain those relationships. We cannot wait for all of the answers. They're never all going to be there. And sometimes when we sit back and wait for the answers, that's when people who shouldn't be driving the procurement process get in front of us and start driving it because they're like, well, whatever, I'll drive. And meanwhile, we are best positioned to do that. And we are a little bit too timid sometimes to push through and figure it out as we go. That's every procurement transaction, at least every one that I've ever been a part of. I mean, there's very rarely a smooth, perfect procurement. And so we're a lot of times having to do that, getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. I wish someone would have told me that earlier in my career. I feel like I spent the first 10 years waiting for like the day that I learned everything so I wouldn't have to like worry as much. It never happens. It never happens. And again, it's not having all the answers. It's knowing how to develop the questions and knowing how to leverage those relationships. Here we are again, 5 minutes later, still haven't bought anything. Strategic planning. It's a little bit of what I talked about earlier. We're aligning the procurement process with the overall goals and mission of the entity. I will sometimes take a random requisition, just the most random one I can find. And I will walk to the desk of the procurement officer that's been assigned that requisition. And I said, in one sentence, tell me how this helps the judiciary meet its mission. First couple times I asked that question, it was a little bit uncomfortable. Now they have answers for it because they're looking at it through that lens. And that's very important for us because if we can't answer that question, go away, Tigger, you're done. If we can't answer that question, there might be a problem. If we can't determine how that proposed transaction is going to move the entity forward in meeting its mission, we need to be asking some questions about that. We want to enhance the entire organization through the strategic planning process. And if we're not included in that first phase, we can't do it. Look at this third bullet point. Who are our competitors? So we're enhancing the organization's competitiveness. Who are your competitors? Who are you in competition with? Uber, yeah, the transit team, Uber, AI, private providers. Yep. What about in procurement? Who are you competing with in your procurement shops? How about that? You're competing with each other, aren't you? There are only so many suppliers, and there are a lot of potential opportunities for them to avail themselves of. What makes your process better than everyone else's? What is it about your organization that makes a supplier want to do business with you instead of the entity down the street? And if you can't answer that question, you need to take that back and think about it because the pendulum has swung and the suppliers have a lot more choice and a lot more power than they did 5, 10, 15 years ago. I mean, when I started in procurement, it was fairly unheard of for suppliers to push back in any meaningful way on our standard contract terms and conditions. Anybody remember those days? where you could just shove the contract in front of the supplier and they would just sign it? It happened. These days, I'm baffled when they don't have red lines to the standard terms and conditions. So what makes our process better? Somebody said at the beginning, it's too difficult to do business. It's too many words. It's too many requirements. What are you doing to fix that? How are you inviting someone and saying it's better to do business with me than anybody else? Jenny just linked to an amazing white paper that NIGP put out a while ago saying, I know bid, and I'll tell you why. And it's a little bit of tough love from our supplier community on the reasons that they're not bidding on contracts. And sometimes, again, going back to my first objective of why we're here, we need to acknowledge those perceptions, whether we believe they're accurate or not, because to the supplier, they're accurate. And so that's really all that matters in this situation, because if they believe they're true, they're not going to transact with us. So we need to acknowledge that they're there. What do you guys think about this last question? How do we get a seat at the strategic planning table? It's very easy for me to say, we got to be there from the beginning. How do we do it? What have you done that's worked? If any of you feel like you're in that strategic position. And if you're not, how do we think we can get there? Relationships is a big one. Promoting our value, talking about some of these things, explaining the benefit to them, right? Because human nature is, what's in it for me? I don't want to come to you just because you told me to come to you, but you might have selfish motives for that. What's in it for me for including you earlier? That's what we need to put out there. This is the benefit to you. This is the benefit to your department. This is how I can really help you stretch your budget. Listen, we're all about to tighten the belt, as it were. So it's a great time for us to get in there and say, I really want to take a look at your FY26 budget with you and determine how we can strategically position ourselves to be able to execute on this, even if we're having to kind of take some budget cuts here. Leadership support, so important. If your leadership doesn't believe that procurement has value, like we've got to fix that. Because if leadership doesn't support that and doesn't support the message that we're putting out there, then we've got a conflict. And unfortunately, if we think one thing and these folks think another thing, people are probably going to listen to them because of the whole status thing that we talked about earlier. So that's another big thing. We need to go to the departments, go to our leadership and explain this is the value to the organization, the value to your department by enacting this, by allowing procurement a seat at the table during the strategic planning process. One of the great benefits that I've had now that I am leading both our finance team and our procurement teams that have separate directors and they're separate departments, they're not together, is bringing them together to talk and getting those FY26 budgets and putting them in the hands of the procurement team. My procurement team has draft budgets of every single department in this organization, and they're looking through them and they're determining what big RFPs are there so that they can build the capacity to do it and start doing market research. Man, our end users were like, because it's, oh, you're going to actually help me with this. You're going to do some of this work for me. Yeah, that's why we're here. And so sometimes it's like that light bulb goes off. Oh, you really are here to help me. Asking questions. Yes, it's very hard when you ask open-ended questions that demonstrate that you want to help someone for them not to be more open with you, Aaron. That's a very good point. Continuous improvement. How many of you regularly review and update your policies and procedures? We're being honest. Remember, we're all amongst friends here. Anybody not know the last time your procedures or your policy were updated? Anybody just not know when the last update was? Once every 11 years. Can you imagine how much of that is outdated? And here's the problem. When an auditor comes in, guess what they're going to do? They're going to pull that 11-year-old policy and those 11-year-old procedures, or God forbid they're even older, and they're like, was this done on a typewriter? And they're going to look at that and they're going to hold you to that standard. Meanwhile, you've had 2 different ERP systems since then, and you're doing things in a totally different and better way, but you're not complying with your own policies and procedures. I have seen so many procurement offices sink in audits because they simply didn't update their policy and moreover their procedures. Policy should be pretty, not vague, but allow some latitude for the procedures to give more detail into how you do the policy. But if you're not reviewing your procedures, we have a standing monthly meeting to review our procedures. Did anything change? And sometimes the answer is no. But sometimes it's like, oh yeah, they pushed out an update to the e-procurement system. So now we have to change this checklist. We have to change that checklist. We obsess with making sure that our procedures are up to date. Because by the way, when a new procurement officer comes in and you're training them and you give them that 11-year-old document, you've just trained them on the old useless way. So if you don't know when the last time your procedures were updated, dust them off tomorrow and check it out. That can be really just so eye-opening to a procurement shop to really understand all of the steps that you're going through. Jenny says review policies annually. Yeah, a policy annually reasonable. Procedures, I would say you should be looking at those more often because again, they're internal training tools that you can use as well, and they're internal onboarding tools. Do you work in an organization where you are encouraged to call attention to issues? Do you work in an organization that has a culture to welcome new ideas and suggestions? If that doesn't sound like your organization, I would suggest that you go work at a different organization. This is where they don't invite me back. So here's the thing. I believe that no one knows more about what needs to happen in a procurement office than the procurement officers that are doing the work every day. And so if we're not taking the pulse of those procurement officers, we're not taking those suggestions, because guess who those suppliers and those end users are complaining to? Your procurement officers. They know. They're living it every single day. So if they don't have an environment where they can call attention to issues, welcome new ideas, suggestions, and by the way, they grow so much by being allowed to do that. So we're growing leaders just by allowing that to happen. So if that isn't you, I would encourage you to either see if you can affect change on the environment or perhaps change your environment altogether. How are we staying informed of industry trends? What kind of things are you guys doing as far as researching industry trends? It can't just be when a requisition hits our desk. We've got to keep our finger on the pulse of the market. Trainings, yes. Webinars, yes. What else? Lots of free stuff you can use too. Conferences, articles. We've got to be scouring the market, trying to learn this intelligence. Legislative changes, yes. Micro learning, suppliers, subject matter experts. We cannot just sit back and be reactive to what comes into our office. That's purchasing. That's purchasing. And Victor with another shameless plug for Forum and VCon, which I will second. Talking to peers, other agencies, questions and answers in the Google group. Yeah, good. NIGP has great message boards too. If you haven't been on there, somebody put on there, has anyone ever solicited for this? What the heck do I do? There is always someone that comes in that has done it before and will provide some really good guidance. We're a fairly small, the Insight community, purchase use. Yep, that's it. We're a fairly small community of procurement professionals. It's important for us to work together with one another to achieve our goals. So with the 5 minutes we have left, it's now 4. Here's what I want to say. We have to inspire other people in our organization, both procurement officers, our end users, our elected officials, by showing how dedicated we are to this. We're always about solutions. We're a solutions-driven profession. We are not about identifying problems. We're about identifying solutions. We keep that integrity. We foster that collaboration. We really not only want to embrace innovation, we want to be the ones igniting it I'll read an article about some crazy new AI thing, and I'll send it to our IT department and be like, oh, that's pretty cool, huh? Like, do you think this is something we would ever think about doing? I'm lighting the flame of innovation within my organization, and we need to do that. And we need to inspire everybody else to do all of those things as well. And one of the things I challenge people with at the end of this is, when you leave the profession, what's your legacy? What did you do that made this place better than when you found it? What is it they're going to say about Jenny, about Victor, about Jason when you leave the profession? Samantha, I will copy paste my. You can look at our website. The website has the mission and vision on it. And you can also, the reason I went to the website is you can bounce up to the main page and see how our mission and vision butts up against, aligns, and complements the overall mission and vision of the organization. That's very important because it's empowering and it really kind of gives you purpose to everything you're doing. Is what I'm doing this? Does it do this? Does it drive us here? Does it get it closer to our utopian vision? Does it drive us to the mission? So yeah, if you want to check that out, that's the link. I will put in, I think the last slide has my contact information on it, but if it doesn't, I will put it in. Questions, comments, concerns? Just want to stare at the cute pug.
I just want to say how great that was. We didn't even talk about purchasing, but this is what
We didn't buy anything, did we?
We
We
didn't
bought
buy
nothing.
anything the whole hour. That's
Because
great.
we know how to buy stuff. Everybody knows how to buy stuff. I could bring someone in. I could bring a college intern, a high school intern in and teach them how to do a purchase order. It doesn't mean they know what they're doing with it. They're taking the requisition and turning it into a purchase order. It's transactional. Everyone can buy. My daughter, very adept at buying on DoorDash. Does not do a lot of market research. Just buys, just purchases. So if we allow folks to just say that's what we do, then that's the perception. And we are the only ones that can change it. So hopefully you got a couple of ideas today about how to start those conversations to the extent that you feel like this isn't already happening in your entity. That's my information. I'm always happy to chat about ideas. Give me some ideas that maybe you're working with in your organization. If you want to chat about anything, I'm here. That's my LinkedIn. The slide deck, I will send it to, who do you want me to send it to?
Why don't you send it to lunch and learn at wineigp.org.
Okay. I will send it as soon as we, let me just turn it into a PDF and I will make sure everybody gets, Kara said, our procurement mission, enhancing transit experience through procurement excellence. Like it, dig it. All right. Thank you guys for